Everyone in the North End knew never to look Salvatore Romano in the eye. If he walked into your business, you didn't just lose money, you usually lost your life. So when the most feared mob boss in the city walked into a failing diner on a rainy Tuesday, surrounded by armed guards, everyone froze. He wasn't there for the pancakes. He was there to burn the place to the ground. But just as he raised his hand to give the kill order, his 6-year-old daughter, who hadn't spoken a word in 2 years, tugged on his trench coat. She pointed a trembling finger at the terrified waitress and whispered one sentence. Just one sentence. And that sentence didn't just save the restaurant. It changed the history of the entire criminal underworld. Here is the full story of what really happened at Henderson's Diner. The story begins on the gloomiest Tuesday November had seen in a decade. We're talking about the kind of rain that doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the grime on the sidewalk stickier. The location was Henderson's Diner, a place that had seen better days. It sat on the corner of 4th and Oak, a neighborhood that was slowly being swallowed up by gentrification on one side and organized crime on the other. The neon sign outside flickered the E in diner, buzzing like a dying insect. Inside, Daisy Jenkins was scraping gum off the underside of table 4. Daisy was 26, but her eyes looked 40. She had that specific kind of exhaustion that comes from working 2 jobs to pay for a nursing degree she never had time to study for, and to support a sick aunt who raised her. Daisy was beautiful in a quiet, unnoticed way. Messy brown hair, tied back in a grease-stained, scrunchy hands roughened by bleach and hot water. She kept her head down. That was her rule for survival. Keep your head down. Do the work. Go home. But tonight, the tension in Henderson's Diner was thicker than the clam chowder. The owner, George Henderson, was pacing behind the counter. George was a good man, a soft man, with a belly full of ulcers and a heart full of regret. He had borrowed money 3 months ago to fix the industrial freezer and pay off a health inspector. He borrowed it from a loan shark named Rocco, the Butcher, Valenti. What George didn't know at the time was that Rocco was a low-level enforcer for the Romano crime family, and the Romanos didn't do payment plans. "Daisy, you should go," George said, his voice trembling as he wiped a spot on the counter that was already clean. He checked his watch for the 10th time in a minute. It was 8:55 p.m. "Please just close up early. I'll handle the register." Daisy looked up, sensing the fear radiating off him. "George, I need the tips. Rent is due on Friday. Besides, who's coming in this rain?" "It's not customers I'm worried about," George whispered, his face pale and sweaty. "I missed the deadline, Daisy. Rocco called this morning. He said the boss is coming personally. They're going to make an example out of the diner." Daisy froze. Everyone knew who the boss was. Salvatore Romano. The man who supposedly ran the shipping yards, the unions, and the police force. They said he had ice water in his veins. They said he hadn't smiled since his wife died in a car bombing 4 years ago. "If they're coming," Daisy said, her voice steady, despite the knot forming in her stomach, "then I'm not leaving you alone. You're 60 years old, George. I'm not letting you face a mob boss by yourself." "You don't understand," George hissed, tears welling in his eyes. "These men, they don't care that you're innocent. If you're here, you're collateral damage." Before Daisy could argue, the bells above the front door didn't just jingle, they shattered. The front door was kicked open with such force that the glass pane cracked. The rain swirled in, bringing the smell of wet pavement and expensive cologne. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The air was sucked out. 3 men walked in first. They were huge, wearing dark raincoats that couldn't hide the bulges of shoulder holsters. They didn't look at Daisy or George. They scanned the room, flipping the open sign to closed and pulling the blinds. Then he entered. Salvatore Romano. He was taller than the photos in the newspapers. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than the diner's annual revenue. His hair was slicked back, dark and severe, and his eyes were the color of steel. He was terrifyingly handsome, but it was the kind of beauty that a wolf has, predatory and lethal. But the most shocking thing wasn't the gun at his hip. It was what, or rather who, was holding his left hand. A little girl, maybe 6 years old. She was dressed in a pristine white coat and patent leather shoes, clutching a ragged, dirty stuffed rabbit that looked like it had survived a war. She had large, dark eyes that darted around the room in panic. This was Mia Romano, the Mafia princess. Why would a man bring his daughter to a shakedown? Rumor was ever since her mother died. Mia had extreme separation anxiety. She screamed if her father left the room. Or maybe Sal Romano was just so arrogant that he didn't care if his child saw him destroy a man's life. Sal let go of the girl's hand, gently gesturing for her to sit at the booth nearest the door. One of the guards, a brute named Tony, stood over the child to protect her. Sal walked to the counter. The sound of his Italian leather shoes on the linoleum floor was a rhythmic death march. Click, click, click. He stopped in front of George. George was shaking so hard the silverware on the counter rattled. "Mr. Henderson," Sal said. His voice was smooth, deep, and terrifyingly calm. "Rocco tells me you've been avoiding his calls." "Mr. Romano," George stammered, I just need 1 more week. The bank is releasing the loan on—" Sal didn't yell. He didn't scream. He simply reached out and swept the entire glass display of pies onto the floor. Crash! Cherry and apple fillings splattered across the tiles, mixed with shards of glass. Daisy gasped, jumping back. Sal looked at her for the first time. His eyes narrowed. He looked at her like she was a bug on his windshield. "Get the girl out of here," he commanded his guard, pointing at Daisy. "Take her out back and teach her not to witness business meetings." Daisy's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew what teach her meant. The guard, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, stepped toward Daisy. He reached over the counter, his hand heavy and rough, grabbing her by the upper arm. His grip was bruising. "No," George yelled, finding a sudden burst of courage. "She has nothing to do with this. Leave her alone." "Sal." Romano turned to George, his face a mask of annoyance. "You're in no position to negotiate, George. You borrowed $50,000. You paid back 5. In my world, that's theft." Sal pulled a heavy, suppressed pistol from his jacket. He placed it on the counter. The metal clunked ominously. "I'm going to ask you one last time," Sal said, unbuttoning his suit jacket. "Where is the money?" "I don't have it," George sobbed. "Then I take the business," Sal said simply. "Tony, start with the kitchen. Burn it." "No, please," Daisy screamed, struggling against the guard holding her. "This is his whole life." Sal turned his cold gaze back to Daisy. He walked around the counter, encroaching on her space. He smelled of rain tobacco and danger. He leaned in close, his voice a lethal whisper. "And you are very loud for someone who is about to be unemployed. Or worse." He raised his hand. It was the signal. The guards pulled out lighters. The man holding Daisy tightened his grip, dragging her toward the back alley door. "Daddy." The voice was small, rusty from disuse, but it cut through the tension like a knife. Sal froze. His hand, raised in the air, stopped mid-motion. Everyone turned. The little girl, Mia, had slid out of the booth. She wasn't looking at her father. She wasn't looking at the guns. She was staring directly at Daisy. Mia walked forward. The guard, Tony, tried to stop her. "Mia, sweetheart, stay back." "Let her go," Mia said. Sal turned slowly, his face pale. His men looked nervous. They knew the rumors Mia hadn't spoken a full sentence to anyone but her father in years, not since the accident. "Mia," Sal whispered, his voice losing its edge. "What did you say?" Mia walked right past her father. She walked right up to the guard holding Daisy. She kicked the guard in the shin with her little patent leather shoe. Surprised, the guard let go. Daisy stumbled back, rubbing her bruised arm, terrified and confused. She looked down at this little girl, this daughter of a monster. Mia looked up at Daisy. The girl's eyes were wide, filled with a recognition that didn't make sense. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the fabric of Daisy's cheap, stained apron. Sal stepped forward, his gun lowered but still in hand. "Mia, come away from her. She's nobody." Mia shook her head violently. She turned to her father, tears streaming down her face. She pointed at Daisy, and then she spoke the sentence that would change everything. "Daddy, you can't hurt her. She's the lady from the locket." The silence that followed was absolute. Sal Romano dropped his gun. It hit the floor with a loud clatter that made George jump, but Sal didn't even blink. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking less like a mob boss and more like a man seeing a ghost. "What?" Sal breathed out. The word was barely audible. "The locket," Mia whispered, her voice gaining strength. "The one you cry over. The one in the safe. It's her." Sal looked at Daisy. Really looked at her. He looked past the messy hair, past the grease stains, past the fear. He looked at the structure of her cheekbones, the shape of her eyes, the specific curve of her jawline. Daisy was trembling. I don't know what she's talking about. I've never met at you." "I swear." Sal moved toward her. This time there was no aggression. It was desperation. He reached into his own shirt, pulling out a silver chain. Attached to it was an antique heart-shaped locket. With shaking hands, he clicked it open. He held it up next to Daisy's face. George gasped. The guards shifted uncomfortably. Inside the locket was a faded miniature photograph of a woman. She was smiling, wearing a sundress, standing in a field of sunflowers. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was a mirror image. The woman in the photo looked exactly like Daisy Jenkins, just clean and happy. "Who are you?" Sal demanded, his voice cracking. "Who are you really?" "I'm just Daisy," she cried, backing away until she hit the back wall. "I'm nobody. I'm from Ohio." "Liar!" Sal roared, slamming his hand against the wall next to her head, boxing her in. "That photo is of my wife, Isabella. She died 4 years ago. So tell me, why do you have her face?" "I don't know." Daisy wept. "I don't know." Mia tugged on Sal's pant leg again. "Daddy, look." Mia pointed to Daisy's neck. In the scuffle, Daisy's uniform collar had been torn slightly. Exposed on her collarbone was a birthmark, a distinct reddish mark shaped almost perfectly like a crescent moon. Sal stared at the mark. He staggered back, his legs giving out. He actually had to grab the counter to stop from falling. Isabella had that mark, Sal whispered. Isabella, she's dead. I saw the body. I buried her. He looked at Daisy with a mixture of horror and sudden violent hope. Rocco! Sal shouted, his voice booming through the diner. Boss! Forget the money. Forget the fire. Sal stared intensely at Daisy. Close the diner. Lock the doors. Nobody leaves. Call the doctor. I want a DNA test kit brought here within 20 minutes. If anyone tries to enter this building, shoot them. Daisy's eyes went wide. You can't keep me here. This is kidnapping. Sal straightened up. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the iron will of the Don. But his eyes were burning with a new obsession. If you are who I think you are, Sal said low, then I haven't just kidnapped you, Daisy. I've found you. He turned to his men. Get her a chair, and get her something to eat. If she is Isabella, God help anyone who has touched a hair on her head. As Daisy was forced into a chair, her mind racing, she looked at the little girl. Mia was smiling, a sad, hopeful little smile. But Daisy wasn't Isabella. She knew she wasn't. She had memories of her childhood. She had a life. Or did she? Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Daisy's head. A flash of a memory that didn't feel like hers. A car exploding. Heat. Screaming. A voice whispering, "Run, Bella, run." Daisy grabbed her head, the room spinning. Part 3 is going to reveal a secret that Daisy herself didn't even know she was keeping. The narrator's voice cuts in. Because the DNA test is about to come back, and the results are not what anyone, not even Sal Romano, expects. The rain outside Henderson's diner had turned into a torrential downpour, hammering against the plate glass windows like 1,000 tiny fists trying to break in. But inside, the silence was louder than the storm. For 20 minutes, nobody moved. The diner, usually a place of clattering plates and sizzling bacon, had been transformed into a purgatory. George Henderson sat on a stool behind the counter, his head in his hands, too terrified to speak. The guards, Rocco and Tony, stood by the front and back exits, their hands never leaving their holsters. They were professional killers, men who had seen terrible things, but even they looked uneasy. They kept stealing glances at the woman sitting in booth number 4. Daisy sat frozen. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of hot tea that George had shakily poured for her, but she didn't drink it. She couldn't stop staring at the reflection in the dark window. Isabella. She had seen the photo in the locket. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was her face. The same slightly crooked smile, the same arch of the eyebrow. "Eat," Sal Romano said. He was sitting across from her in the booth. He hadn't taken his eyes off her for a single second. He had removed his suit jacket, rolling up the sleeves of his white dress shirt. On his forearm, Daisy noticed a tattoo, a date in Roman numerals. 4th December, 2019. The day his wife died. "I'm not hungry," Daisy whispered. Her voice felt foreign in her throat. "You're shaking," Sal observed. His voice was no longer the boom of a mob boss. It was the quiet, intense rumble of a man trying to solve a puzzle that could destroy him. "Are you going into shock? Or are you remembering?" "I have nothing to remember," Daisy insisted, though her voice wavered. "My name is Daisy Jenkins. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. I moved here 4 years ago to take care of my Aunt Linda. I dropped out of nursing school because I couldn't afford the tuition." She recited the facts like a shield. These were the truths of her life. They had to be. Sal leaned forward. The air between them crackled. Dayton, Ohio, he repeated slowly, tasting the words. Tell me about your house in Dayton. What color was the front door? Daisy opened her mouth to answer. Blue. It was blue. But then she paused. Was it blue? Or had she just seen a blue door in a movie recently? She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to summon the image of her childhood home. She saw a porch. She saw a street. But the details were fuzzy, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. It was painted wood, she stammered. You don't know, Sal said softly. It wasn't an accusation. It was a realization. You don't remember clearly, do you? I do. Daisy snapped, her fear turning into defensive anger. I'm stressed. You have men with guns guarding the door. At that moment, the back door opened. A gust of wind and rain swept through the diner, making the napkins flutter. A short, balding man in a trench coat hurried in, clutching a black leather medical bag to his chest. He was soaking wet and looked like he might vomit from nerves. This was Dr. Elias Stanton, a man on the Romano payroll. He didn't ask questions. He just stitched up bullet wounds and signed false death certificates. Mr. Romano, Dr. Stanton gasped, wiping rain from his glasses. I came as fast as I could. Is that the kit? Sal asked, ignoring the pleasantries. Yes, it's a rapid result DNA sequencer. Portable, highly accurate. We use it for paternity disputes, usually. Use it, Sal commanded. He pointed at Daisy. And then use it on Mia. The doctor approached the booth. Daisy shrank back against the red vinyl seat. It's just a cheek swab, miss, the doctor said gently, his hands trembling slightly as he opened a sterile package. It won't hurt. Daisy looked at Sal. Why are you doing this? Even if I look like her. People have doubles. It happens. The birthmark, Sal said, his eyes dropping to her collarbone. The face, and Mia. He gestured to the end of the booth. The little girl Mia had curled up into a ball, clutching her dirty rabbit. She was fast asleep now, exhausted by the adrenaline. But even in her sleep, one of her small hands was reaching out, gripping the hem of Daisy's apron. She hasn't touched another human being in 2 years. Sal revealed, his voice cracking, with a raw vulnerability that shocked Daisy. She doesn't let me hold her. She screams if the nannies get too close. But she touched you. She knows you. Daisy looked at the sleeping child. A strange, warm ache bloomed in her chest. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. No, it couldn't be. She had never had children. She knew that. She opened her mouth. The doctor swabbed the inside of her cheek. Then he gently swabbed the sleeping child. How long? Sal demanded. The machine needs to process, Dr. Stanton said, feeding the samples into a brick-sized device connected to a tablet. 45 minutes, maybe an hour. Then we wait, Sal said. He signaled to Rocco. Pour the lady some brandy. She looks like she's going to faint. The next hour was the longest of Daisy's life. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic whir-click of the DNA machine processing the data. Sal didn't check his phone. He didn't pace. He sat opposite Daisy, watching her hands. You have a scar, he said, suddenly, pointing to a faint white line on her left knuckle. Daisy looked down. I burned myself on the oven last year. Sal shook his head slowly. No, Isabella got that scar when we were in Sicily. 2018. We were cooking. The oil splashed. I put the bandage on myself. Daisy felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty room. Stop it. Please. You're trying to overwrite my memories with yours. Tell me about the car crash, Sal said abruptly. Daisy froze. What an... Earlier, Sal said, his eyes boring into hers. When you looked at the locket, you grabbed your head. You flinched. What did you see? Daisy wanted to lie. But under his intense gaze, the lie died in her throat. I saw fire. I heard a noise. A boom. Isabella died in a car bomb, Sal whispered. Someone planted C4 under the chassis of her Mercedes. I was inside the house. I watched it happen from the window. The police said there was nothing left. They identified her by dental records, or what they thought were her dental records. Sal leaned in across the table, his face inches from hers. If you are her, then someone switched the bodies. Someone saved you, altered your memory, and hid you in a diner in the middle of nowhere. Why? Daisy whispered. Why would anyone do that? To punish me, Sal said darkly. Or to use you as leverage? Beep, beep, beep. The machine on the table let out 3 high-pitched electronic chirps. The silence in the room shattered. Dr. Stanton jumped. He looked at the tablet screen. He adjusted his glasses. He squinted. Then he went very, very pale. He looked up at Sal Romano with fear in his eyes. Well, Sal stood up. The air in the diner felt heavy, charged with electricity. Mr. Romano, the doctor swallowed hard. The probability of maternity, it's 99.9998%. The doctor turned the screen around. She isn't a double, the doctor whispered. Biologically speaking, this woman is Mia's mother. Sal Romano didn't scream. He didn't flip the table. He simply exhaled a long, shuddering breath that seemed to carry 4 years of grief out of his body. He looked at Daisy. The hardness in his face melted away, leaving a man who looked shattered by a miracle. Bella, he whispered. He reached out a hand slowly, as if she were made of glass. He touched her cheek. His fingers were warm, rough, and trembling. Daisy didn't pull away. She couldn't. Because when the doctor said the words 99.9%, something in Daisy's mind broke. A wall she didn't know existed crumbled. The smell of rain. A man's laughter. This man's laughter. A little girl in a crib. A song about a star. Daisy gasped, clutching her chest. I can't breathe. Breathe, Bella. Breathe, Sal said, moving around the booth to sit next to her. He didn't grab her. He surrounded her, his presence a shield. I've got you. No. Daisy pushed him away, panic rising like bile. This doesn't make sense, if I'm her. Who is Daisy Jenkins? I have a social security number. I have a lease. I have an aunt. She fumbled for her apron pocket. Her hands were shaking so badly, she dropped her phone twice before unlocking it. I'm calling her, Daisy cried hysterically. I'm calling Aunt Linda. She'll tell you. She'll tell you I'm crazy. Sal watched her, his expression darkening. Isabella had no living family. Her parents died when she was 20. Well, I have an aunt, Daisy screamed. She jabbed the contact labeled Aunt Linda. She put the phone on speaker and slammed it onto the table. Ring, ring, ring. The sound echoed through the silent diner. Everyone was watching the phone. George, the guards, the doctor, Sal. Click. The call connected. Daisy. The voice on the other end was female, elderly, and warm. It sounded exactly like the woman Daisy had visited every Sunday for 4 years. The woman who made her soup when she was sick. "Aunt Linda." Daisy sobbed, relief flooding her veins. "Aunt Linda, please, you have to help me. There are men here. They think I'm someone else. They think I'm a Mafia wife. Tell them. Tell them who I am." There was a pause on the line, a silence that lasted 1 second too long. When the voice came back, the warmth was gone. The elderly tremble was gone. The voice was flat, cold, and professional. "Code Black," the woman said. "Asset has been compromised. Location." Daisy froze. "What?" Sal's eyes widened. He recognized that tone. He snatched the phone from the table. "Who is this?" Sal barked into the phone. The voice on the other end changed again. It wasn't an old woman anymore. It sounded synthetic, distorted. "Hello, Salvatore," the voice said. "It took you longer than we thought to find her. We expected you to check the diners in the North End 6 months ago." "You stole my wife," Sal growled, his hand gripping the phone so tight the plastic creaked. "You let me bury an empty casket. You let my daughter stop speaking." "We gave Isabella a second chance," the voice replied calmly. "She was unhappy, Salvatore. She wanted out. We just facilitated a transition. We wiped the slate clean. Daisy Jenkins is a good person, much happier than Isabella ever was." "You brainwashed her," Sal spat. "We reprogrammed her, for her own safety. But if she is speaking to you, then the experiment is over." "Who are you?" Sal demanded. "The Commission, the Feds. We are the ones who clean up your messes," the voice said. "But now Daisy is a loose end, and we don't like loose ends." "If you touch her," Sal said, his voice dropping to a demonic whisper, "I will burn this city down until I find you." "You're trapped in a diner, Salvatore," the voice mocked. "Look out the window." Sal looked up. Rocco and Tony looked up. Outside in the pouring rain across the street, a black van had pulled up. Then another. Then a third. Men were pouring out of the vans. They weren't wearing police uniforms. They were wearing tactical gear balaclavas and carrying military-grade assault rifles. These weren't street thugs. This was a hit squad. "Say goodbye to Daisy," the voice said. Click. The line went dead. "Get down!" Sal roared. Crash! The front window of Henderson's diner exploded inward as the first canister of tear gas shattered the glass. Daisy screamed, covering her head, as glass sprayed over the booth. Mia woke up, shrieking in terror. "Rocco, Tony, front and back," Sal shouted instantly, switching into war mode. He grabbed Daisy and threw her to the floor, covering her body with his own. He scooped Mia up with one arm, pulling her under the heavy oak table. "Daddy," Mia cried. "It's okay, baby. It's okay," Sal said, pulling his gun. He looked at Daisy. Daisy was lying on the dirty linoleum glass in her hair, looking at the man she had feared an hour ago. Now he was the only thing between her and death. "Who are they?" Daisy yelled over the sound of gunfire erupting outside. "Who is my aunt?" Sal checked the magazine of his pistol. He looked at her with grim determination. "They are the people who stole your life," Sal said. "And I'm the man who is going to kill every single one of them to get it back." Bullets began to shred the diner walls. Coffee cups exploded. The neon sign buzzed and died. George Henderson was cowering behind the counter. "I don't have insurance for this," he wailed. "Stay down," Sal commanded. He looked at Daisy one last time before the chaos truly began. "Daisy, If we get out of this, you don't have to be Isabella. You don't have to be my wife. But you are Mia's mother. So fight. Fight for her." Daisy looked at the little girl huddled against Sal's chest. Mia reached out her hand again. Daisy took it. And in that moment, the fear in Daisy's heart turned into something else. A mother's rage. She looked around. She grabbed the only weapon she could find, a jagged shard of heavy glass from the broken pie display. "I'm not dying in a diner," Daisy said through gritted teeth. Sal grinned. It was a terrifying, blood-soaked grin. "That's my girl." The first canister of tear gas didn't just smoke. It hissed like a viper spinning across the checkered floor and spewing a thick white cloud that smelled of pepper and sulfur. "Eyes shut. Don't rub them." Sal roared, his voice cutting through the ringing in Daisy's ears. He ripped a piece of fabric from the tablecloth, dipped it into the pitcher of ice water on the table, and pressed it against Mia's face. "Hold this, baby. Don't let go." Daisy watched him. The world was narrowing down to a tunnel of adrenaline. The diner, once a place of comfort, had become a kill box. The lights were out, shattered by the gunfire, leaving only the strobe light effect of muzzle flashes from the street and the headlights of the tactical vans cutting through the smoke. "They're coming through the front," Tony yelled from his position behind the overturned jukebox. His voice was tight professional. He fired 2 shots blindly into the smoke. Bang. Bang. "Rocco the back," Sal commanded. "Dr. Stanton, get George into the freezer. It's airtight. It'll keep the gas out." George was sobbing, curled in a fetal position. The doctor grabbed him by the collar, dragging the heavy-set man toward the stainless steel door of the walk-in fridge. Daisy tried to move, but her legs felt like lead. She was a waitress. She served coffee. She didn't do this. But as the white smoke billowed around her, blinding her, something strange happened. The panic that had been gripping her chest suddenly evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, mechanical calm. It was a sensation she didn't recognize, yet it felt intimately familiar. Her breathing slowed down. Her pupils dilated, adjusting to the darkness. She didn't think about doing these things. Her body just did them. A shadow loomed in the broken front window. A man in full tactical gear, black helmet, gas mask, body armor, stepped through the frame. Glass crunching under his heavy boots. He raised his rifle, scanning the room. He didn't see Sal, who was crouched low behind the counter. But he saw Daisy. He swiveled the barrel toward her. In that split second, Daisy didn't scream. She didn't freeze. Without a conscious thought, Daisy's right hand lashed out. She didn't throw the jagged shard of glass she was holding randomly. She threw it with the precision of a dart player, hitting a bullseye. The glass flew through the air and struck the man in the small exposed gap between his helmet and his Kevlar vest, right in the soft tissue of the neck. The man gurgled, dropping his rifle to clutch his throat, and fell backward out of the window. Sal turned his eyes wide in the gloom. He had seen it. "Good throw," he grunted, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes. He wasn't looking at a waitress anymore. Daisy looked at her hand, horrified. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," Sal snapped, grabbing her arm and pulling her low as a hail of bullets chewed up the booth they had just been sitting in. Upholstery foam exploded into the air like snow. "You just bought us 5 seconds." "Boss, we can't hold the front," Tony shouted. "There's too many of them. At least 12 heat signatures moving in." "The alley," Sal said. "Rocco, is the car clear?" "Alley is clear, but they're flanking," Rocco yelled from the kitchen. Sal turned to Daisy. He holstered his pistol and reached into his ankle holster, pulling out a smaller, compact 9mm. He shoved it into Daisy's hands. The metal was cold and heavy. "I can't use this," Daisy cried, pushing it back. "I hate guns." "Your mouth hates guns," Sal said, staring deep into her eyes. "But Isabella was the best shot in the family. Let your hands remember." He didn't wait for her to argue. He scooped up Mia, shielding her tiny body with his broad chest. "Move kitchen now." They scrambled over the debris. The air was getting thick hard to breathe. Daisy coughed, her eyes stinging, but she kept pace with Sal. She moved low, keeping her head down, instinctively checking corners. Check the corner. Clear left, clear right. Why do I know how to do this? The thought terrified her more than the bullets. They burst into the kitchen. It was chaos. Pots and pans were scattered everywhere. Rocco was firing through the back door into the rainy alleyway. "They're blocking the exit," Rocco grunted, reloading. "2 shooters on the roof across the alley." Sal looked around. He saw the industrial stove. He saw the gas line. "Rocco, give me your lighter," Sal said. Rocco tossed it. Sal turned to Daisy and Tony. "When I say go, you run. You run to the black SUV parked 3 spots down. Tony, you drive. Daisy, you get Mia in the middle seat, and you stay down." "What about you?" Daisy asked, her voice trembling. "I'm going to create a distraction." Sal moved to the stove. He kicked the gas pipe until it bent and hissed. The smell of natural gas began to mix with the tear gas. "Go!" Sal roared. He lit a napkin and threw it toward the stove, then dove out the back door. Daisy didn't look back. She sprinted into the rain, clutching the gun in one hand and grabbing Mia's coat with the other as Sal passed the child to her. Boom! The kitchen of Henderson's diner erupted. The blast blew the back door off its hinges and sent a fireball rolling into the alleyway. The force of the explosion knocked the 2 snipers on the opposing roof off balance. "Move! Move!" Tony screamed, shoving Daisy toward a sleek armored Cadillac Escalade parked in the shadows. Daisy threw the door open and dove inside, dragging Mia with her. Tony jumped in the driver's seat. Rocco jumped in the passenger side. "Where's Sal?" Daisy screamed, looking out the rain-streaked window. The alley was filled with smoke and fire. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then a figure emerged from the flames. Sal Romano. His expensive suit singed his face, streaked with soot, running with the intensity of a demon. He was firing behind him, suppressing the operatives trying to follow through the fire. He reached the car. He wrenched the back door open and threw himself in, beside Daisy. "Drive!" Sal yelled. Tony slammed the accelerator. The heavy SUV roared to life, tires spinning on the wet pavement before catching grip. They fishtailed out of the alley, just as bullets sparked against the bulletproof glass of the rear window. The silence inside the SUV was heavy, broken only by the aggressive hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump-thump of the windshield wipers fighting the storm. They had been driving for 20 minutes. Tony was taking a convoluted route, weaving through the industrial district, doubling back under bridges to ensure they weren't being tailed. In the back seat, the adrenaline was beginning to crash, leaving behind a cold, shaking exhaustion. Mia was awake, but silent. She was curled up on Daisy's lap. It was an instinctual position for the child, seeking the safest place she knew. And terrifyingly, the safest place she knew was Daisy. Daisy looked down at the child. She smoothed Mia's dark curls away from her forehead. Her hand was steady now. "Is everyone hit?" Sal asked, his voice gravelly. He was checking a graze on his arm, wiping blood away with a handkerchief. "Clean," Rocco said from the front. Clean, Tony echoed. Sal turned his head slowly to look at Daisy. The streetlights flickered over his face, casting long shadows that made him look older, wearier. You, Sal said. Daisy flinched. She looked down at her hands. She was still holding the 9mm pistol. Her finger was indexed along the slide, perfectly safe, perfectly professional. She hadn't even realized she was holding it properly. She dropped the gun onto the floor mat as if it were a venomous snake. I don't know how I did that, Daisy whispered. The man in the window. I saw the gap in his armor. I didn't think. You hit the jugular notch, Sal said quietly. It's a vulnerable point about 2 inches wide. Most soldiers can't hit that with a knife, let alone a piece of broken glass from 15 feet away. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Isabella was trained by the Mossad before she met me. Her father was a diplomat with connections. She spoke 4 languages. She could disassemble a Glock in 12 seconds blindfolded. He opened his eyes and looked at her. You aren't a waitress, Daisy. You never were. But I remember, Daisy insisted, tears welling up. I remember my prom. I remember failing my driving test. I remember my first dogbuster. Implants, Sal said. Hypnotic suggestion. False memories. The people who took you, Aunt Linda and her crew, they are professionals. They built a cage inside your mind and locked Isabella in the basement. Daisy shook her head violently. No, that's sci-fi stuff. That's not real. We just had a shootout with a paramilitary death squad in a diner, Sal pointed out dryly. Real left the building an hour ago. Mia stirred in Daisy's lap. The little girl looked up, her eyes sleepy but lucid. Mama, Mia whispered. It was the first time she had used the word. Daisy's heart stopped. She looked down at the child. She wanted to correct her. She wanted to say, no, sweetie, I'm Daisy. But the word mama triggered something. A sudden violent headache spiked behind Daisy's eyes. A flash of white light. Memory. She is standing on a balcony overlooking the ocean. The wind is warm. She is holding a baby Mia. Sal is standing behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist. He kisses her neck. They will never find us here, Bella, he says. They always find us, Sal, she replies. Her voice, it's her voice, but lower, more confident. But I won't let them take her. Daisy gasped, snapping back to the present. The interior of the SUV felt too small. Daisy touched her temple. I remembered the balcony. Sal froze. He stopped breathing. The balcony in Positano. Overlooking the water, Daisy whispered. You were hugging me. You said they wouldn't find us. Sal let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He reached out and took Daisy's hand. He squeezed it so hard it hurt. It's breaking, Sal said, a fierce intensity in his voice. The conditioning. It's breaking. You're coming back to me. I don't want to be her, Daisy cried, pulling her hand away. She sounds dangerous. She sounds unhappy. The voice on the phone said Isabella wanted to leave. Sal's face hardened. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the stone-cold mask of the Don. Isabella was complicated, Sal admitted. We fought. The life, it wears on you. But she didn't leave me. Not like this. She wouldn't have left Mia. Where are we going? Daisy asked, changing the subject. She couldn't handle the emotional weight of his stare. Not the mansion, Sal said. They'll be watching it. We're going to a safe house, an old garment factory in the meat-packing district. Thick walls, no windows, defensible. Tony turned the wheel sharp right. The car descended a ramp into a dark underground garage. "We're here, boss." As the car came to a halt, Sal turned to Daisy. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Whoever Aunt Linda is, she isn't going to stop. She activated a kill squad. That means you are a liability to them now. The only way you survive, the only way Mia survives, is if you figure out who you really are." He opened the door. "You need to stop fighting the memories, Daisy. You need to let Isabella out. Because right now, Daisy the waitress is a victim. But Isabella is a survivor." Daisy looked at the gun on the floor mat. She hesitated. Then slowly she reached down and picked it up. She checked the safety. She ejected the magazine, checked the rounds, and slammed it back in. The motion was smooth, fluid, and terrifyingly natural. She looked up at Sal. Her eyes were different now. Harder. "Let's go," she said. The safe house was a converted tile factory in the meat-packing district, a fortress of red brick and iron, located 3 stories above the street. It smelled of dust and old machinery, but to Daisy it smelled like the only place left in the world that wasn't burning. Rocco and Tony took positions at the freight elevator and the fire escape. Sal carried a sleeping Mia into a small back room where a cot had been set up. He laid her down with a tenderness that contradicted the violence of the last hour, covering her with his suit jacket. When Sal returned to the main room, Daisy was standing in front of a cracked industrial mirror, washing the soot and blood off her face with a rag and a bottle of tepid water. She stared at her reflection. The woman looking back wasn't Daisy Jenkins anymore. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The Daisy who worried about rent and tips felt like a dream she was waking up from. "There is a first aid kit under the sink," Sal said, leaning against a support pillar. He looked exhausted, his shirt stained with blood and ash. "Let me look at that cut on your forehead." Daisy didn't move. She kept staring at the mirror. "Aunt Linda," she said softly. Sal stiffened. "What about her?" "On the phone," Daisy said, her voice devoid of emotion. "She didn't ask who was attacking me. She didn't ask if I was hurt. She asked for my location. And then she said, 'Asset compromised.'" Daisy turned to face Sal. "She wasn't my aunt, was she? She wasn't even family." "No," Sal said grimly. "We've been running facial recognition on the contact photo from your phone while we drove. Her real name is Evelyn Cross. She's a former director of operations for a shadow agency called the Citadel. They specialize in erasing people. They take high-value targets, wipe their memories, and plant them in new lives to use as leverage later." Daisy felt a chill run through her bones, but she didn't shiver. "Why me? Why keep me alive?" "Because of what you know," Sal said, walking closer. "Isabella, you were the only person who knew where the Citadel's black ledger was hidden. They tried to kill you 4 years ago, but when the car bomb failed to kill you, they panicked." Daisy looked down at her hands, the hands that had poured coffee for 3 years, the hands that had just killed a man with a shard of glass. "They made a mistake," Daisy whispered. "What sort?" "They let me keep the heart," Daisy said. She looked toward the room where Mia was sleeping. "They could erase the codes, they could erase the marriage, but they couldn't erase her. That's why I reacted to the locket. That's why I could throw that glass." Suddenly, Daisy's phone, which sat on the rusty metal table, buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text message. Sal reached for it, but Daisy was faster. She picked it up. The screen glowed in the dim light. "Sender Aunt Linda, Message, bring the girl to the Pier 4 warehouse by midnight, or we release the gas in the safe house vents. You have 30 minutes, Daisy. Be a good girl. Sal read the message over her shoulder. His face went white. He looked up at the air vents running along the ceiling. Rocco Tony, Sal shouted. Check the ventilation intake. Now. It's a bluff, Daisy said calmly. Sal looked at her, stunned. We can't take that risk. We have to move. It's a bluff, Daisy repeated, her voice dropping an octave, becoming husky and commanding. Evelyn Linda is arrogant. She thinks she's talking to the waitress. She thinks she's talking to the scared little mouse who served pancakes. Daisy walked over to the table where the weapons were laid out. She picked up the 9mm pistol again. She racked the slide, the metallic click-clack echoing through the empty factory. She turned to Sal. Her posture had changed. She stood taller. The slouch of the waitress was gone, replaced by the lethal grace of a woman who had once been trained by the Mossad. Daisy is gone, Sal, she said. Sal stared at her. For the first time in 4 years, he saw his wife, truly saw her. Bella, he whispered. She wants a meeting at Pier 4, Daisy said, checking the magazine. Fine. We'll go to Pier 4. It's a trap, Sal warned. They'll have a kill team waiting. Daisy walked up to him. She reached out and straightened his collar, her fingers brushing the pulse in his neck. I know it's a trap, Salvatore, she said, a dark, dangerous smile playing on her lips. But they're expecting a waitress and a grieving widower. She turned toward the door, her eyes burning with a mother's rage. They aren't expecting us. Daisy Jenkins walked out the door. But she didn't walk like a waitress. She walked like a queen returning to claim her kingdom. The war had begun, and God help anyone who stood in her way. And that is where we have to leave it for today. Can you believe that transformation from a terrified waitress scraping gum off tables to a lethal assassin, ready to take down a shadow government agency, all because of one sentence from a little girl? It turns out the strongest force in the world isn't the Mafia. And it isn't fear. It's a mother's instinct. Daisy didn't just remember who she was. She chose who she needed to be. But now the real question remains. Can Sal and Daisy actually survive the ambush at Pier 4? And what secrets are buried in that black ledger that are worth killing for? If you want to see part 2 of this story and find out what happens at the warehouse, you need to destroy that like button right now. Let's aim for 10,000 likes on this video. If we hit that goal, I will drop the sequel where Daisy and Sal take the war to Aunt Linda. Also comment the word locked down below if you think Daisy's memory is fully back, or if there are still secrets hiding in her mind. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the showdown. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.